Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's critique of pure reason. Where are we?
Woo.
Over here. Yeah. Woohoo! All right. Yeah. Pat and Kirk are here today, joining us again. Last time was a bit of a doozy. We're up here, not on this page, but we're in the section here, anticipations of perception, which is part of the systematic representation of all synthetic principles. So we're now seeing how the principles of synthetic cognition are represented. Um,
Systematically.
yes, as he has so graciously designated his enterprise that way, so we can know that. Um, and yeah, as you can see here, so in all appearances, the real, which is an object of the sensation, has intensive magnitude. So we're kind of going over what is required for perception, essentially. The anticipation of perception, to my understanding, that's what that means on some level, metaphysically or epistemologically, probably both.
Well, anticipations of perception. He's talking about the concepts um,
Yes, thank you. That's a good
of
clarification.
the understanding, right? And the concepts of the understanding. I mean, what is necessary for perception? Like, all of this is what is necessary for perception at some level. But he's
Right,
talking specifically about
conceptually.
the concepts of the understanding.
Right.
Like, what do we need? Yeah, exactly.
Because
What do we need?
I should have said this. We're in the transcendental logic, so that might have been some helpful hints. But sorry, continue if you had anything more to say, Patrick.
Um, yeah. So he's talking about uh, well, this is supposed to line up with the quality of judgments. This is supposed to explain the anticipations of perception is supposed to explain how we make judgments of quality, apparently. Uh this is one of the sections, in fact, that Schopenhauer did critique to
Oh,
an
good, you
extent.
found
He
it. I
said,
forgot the right.
what on yeah, he did. He says and I'll quote it because I've got it up.
Let's go.
Um yeah, he says, oh, wait, do I? Oh, here we go. What on earth? Yeah, what on earth does the quantity of judgments have to do with the fact that every perception has an extensive magnitude? What does the quality of judgments have to do with the fact that every sensation has a degree? The former rests on the fact that space is the form of our outer perception, and the latter is nothing more than an empirical and indeed entirely subjective observation, drawn merely from considering the character of our sensations. And this is exactly the latter. See, I can kind of see where he's going for the idea of like perception having extensive magnitude, dealing with the quantity of judgments, because we can all, in virtue of the fact that we have like an outer sensation, I could measure, like, literally how big is this thing, and I could count one, two, three, four, five, six, whatever it is, right?
Uh-huh.
So I kind of get the connection there. But when it comes to the quality of judgments being represented by the fact that we have like differing intensities of sensation, the problem is I can't in any way actually measure or differentiate the intensity of that sensation because it's entirely subjective, because it's internal. So how do
Right.
I
It's
actually
apprehended.
conceptualize it?
Like, where does he
Yeah,
say that?
exactly.
He says, yeah, it feels only an instant if I do not take. Yeah, as something in appearance, apprehend, not successive synthesis proceeding from the parts of the whole representation.
Yeah, I
Therefore, has
mean,
no extensive
maybe this is
magnitude.
a little
What's that?
I mean, maybe this is a little bit positivist of me, but like it seems to me, okay, sure. If we have an extended body in front of us, right? Let's say that there's a table in front of all of us. We could take out a tape measure and say, oh, this table is 3 feet long. And so we could all make a common judgment about the quantity of that table. So that makes some sense to me. But the question of like how intensely do I sense that table? That's just completely subjective. How do I measure it? How could I possibly conceptualize it if I don't measure it?
Well, I think Kant's saying here it's merely by means of sensation.
No, but
Um,
he says, but we're talking about a concept here. We're talking about the formation of a concept of quality, and he's saying that the concept of quality of judgment, is formed by the anticipation of differing degrees of intensity of perception.
Is there a is there a are you quoting that from somewhere? Or is
What
that
we're
just
talking
like
about,
the general understanding of?
it's from the table of the judgments,
Oh,
the table of the categories responding to it.
let me see. Let me go back to.
I bet I could Google that and it would just come up. Kant
Yeah.
table of judgments.
Yeah. Oh, I see it. Okay, so
Yeah, so there are those
of quantity, of quality, of
quantity.
modality, and of relation. That's not in order that he puts it in.
Yeah, yeah,
And of quality, there's reality, negation, and limitation. So you're saying this is what we're like in right now?
yeah. So how does an infinite judgment come from? I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
they're principles of pure understanding. There's axioms of intuition, anticipations of perception, which is what we're in now, analogies of experience, and postulates of empirical thinking in general.
Hmm.
So these are principles of the pure understanding. I don't think these are categories.
I think that this, well, the principles of the pure understanding. I don't know how that's different from a category.
Oh, actually, I don't think
I
they
guess
are.
it's the
I no,
basis
never
for a
mind.
category.
I don't think
I
they are. He might actually draw an equivalence. Actually, now that you say that, I think he did.
If
Where?
they're not the categories, they're at least the basis of the categories.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the question he's trying to answer is on what basis of perceptions? Like, what is the truth
Oh,
maker of categories?
so here's the thing. Remember that
Right.
there was a weird graph. I don't know if you remember this, Patrick. There's a
Uh
weird
huh.
graph that it's a footnote. It was inserted in the first copy in Kant's own copy, I guess, of the first edition, and he has like mathematics, physiology, and then physical and metaphysical, and
Yeah, I
it
remember
yeah, anticipations of
this.
perceptions. Um, so it says that they're under the branch of mathematics, and it says they're real, and perception is the consciousness of an appearance before any concept. So this is preconceptual, it seems.
Yes, it's the basis of concepts, isn't it? It's the principle.
Right. So why does this have to be conceptual if it's preconceptual?
Well, but my question is, how do we get from there are different like intensities of sensation to a concept? What is the concept there? What is the concept of quality? Affirmative, negative,
Well,
infinite.
why are you
Okay,
restricting
so
it
I
to a
guess it's just
specific?
okay. Okay, hold on. So affirmative, negative, infinite. There's at least 0 and 1, right? So the
Yeah,
1 being affirmative and the 0 being negative. So I guess it's just the idea that like
there's a
we
spectrum.
can perceive it or not. um but then why is he going into a
No,
spectrum?
but yeah, he did go into a spectrum, right? Somewhere in here. Like he said, there's like
I
negatio zero, and then like, uh,
All right, I'm not going to try to understand this anymore.
you don't want to. This might be like valuable if we can like get to it. Although,
I I I don't
okay, how about
I've lost
let's
track. I've completely lost track of what we're doing. I have completely lost track of the thread here. And a lot of it probably has to do with the fact of like how much we've lost here. I don't know what part of the critique this is or what he's doing.
so I can try to put it together. Not that I'm a master at the critique, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was to get better at the critique. But
I
let's see. Okay, so
Did you send me that PDF
yeah, it's in
in
the
Kant study?
it's either that or in resources, one of the two. I think it's in
Okay,
Kant.
it's in Kant
It's in Kant
study.
study. Yeah.
So what I need to find is the page that actually deals with like systematic representation of all principles of the pure understanding
Yeah,
and
it's on page
try to
285, I think, the
understand
one you're looking for.
what it is he's doing here.
Yeah. It will soon be shown that, as far as the evidence as well as the a priori determination of appearances according to the categories of magnitude and quality are concerned, if one attends. Oh, yeah, okay, so magnitude and quality are categories. If one
Mm-hmm.
attends solely to the form of the latter, quality, their principles are importantly distinct from those of the two others. While the former are merely capable of an intuitive certainty, the latter are capable only of discursive certainty. Though in both cases they are capable of a complete certainty, I will therefore call the former mathematical and latter dynamical principles. So magnitude is a mathematical principle in the sense that it comes through intuition.
What is a principle of the pure understanding?
Okay, let's find that because I think he did draw an equivalence between categories, but that I could be wrong, and that's a really important.
This is, I think, where I completely lost the thread because he uses the word principle and he never defines it.
He might, but he could just be forgetting. Although knowing Kant, I wouldn't be surprised. He actually just didn't. Um, okay, on system of principles of pure understanding. Okay, now our task is to exhibit in systematic combination the judgments that the understanding actually brings about a priori subject to this critical warning, for which our table of the categories must doubtless give us natural and secure Okay, what the fuck? Oh, understanding for synthetic judgments. For it is precisely though these whose relation to possible experience must constitute all pure cognition. Sensibility will. Oh, a priori principles bear this name not merely because they contain in themselves the grounds of other judgments, but also because they are not themselves grounded in higher and more general cognitions. Yet this property does not elevate them above all proof, for although this could not be carried further objectively, but rather grounds all cognition of its object, yet this does not prevent a proof from the subjective. Okay, blah blah blah.
Okay, and doesn't he distinguish it from axioms? Okay, he says only one of them is an axiom. The axioms of intuitions are axioms.
Yes.
So, what are the others?
So anticipation. So go on. Are you on page 285?
I was on 284.
I would go to
So,
285. Yeah, there's a
okay.
chart.
Yeah, I see the chart. My question is, okay, so it's an in intuition, it's an axiom. That works. Why is only intuition an axiom if he's talking about things that like why does he only use the term axiom for intuition and why are the rest principles not
Because they're formal.
axioms are formal? Okay.
That's like it's pure mathematics and
Anticipations are
applied
real?
mathematics. It's
Okay,
like it's
anticipations are
so
real.
anticipations of perceptions, I guess, would be more something like of like physics or something like or how like the anticipations of like physics basically is what I'm like is maybe an analogy at least that like fits here. Or no, would that just be applied mathematics?
Postulates of empirical thinking in general, analogies of experience. Okay, so almost there. I'm almost to getting it, but I just don't understand why the term axiom only applies to the first category.
It seems formal versus real
Okay,
is the
but what
just
about physiology? Those are analogies and postulates.
well those look to be under mathematics
Okay, but my question is why aren't all of these axioms? Because the way he's defined a principle is it's something we have to derive Like we have to take it before anything else, which sounds like an axiom to me.
Um,
I'd have to think. I mean, I've heard multiple definitions given of the term axiom, so I'd have to think about this.
well, it'd be helpful if we could find what like Kant means, because Kant usually uses words in ways that aren't like typical, which is part of like the frustration in like reading and interpreting what he's saying. Um,
Right. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's easier to understand than Hegel.
well, we're reading
Uh,
Kant, not Hegel.
I know, but I'm just saying it's a joke.
Yeah, no, I know.
Axioms,
Um,
general axioms of intuition, axioms, axiom. Oh, aha.
can you tell me a page that this aha happened on?
Yeah. Go to page 288.
Oh, I was
He
going
says
too
something
much.
about.
Yeah. Oh. So just go into the axioms of intuition.
Go
Okay.
to B205, and go to the self-evident
Evident
propositions
propositions
of
are numerical relation.
relation.
On the
On the
contrary,
contrary, sure, synthetic, but not general like those of geometry, and for that reason cannot also be called axiom, but rather be named numerical formulas. That is, 7 plus 5 equals 12 is not an analytic proposition. For I do not think that the number 12 is either a representation of 7
oh,
nor.
it's a synthetic analytic thing.
No, it's general.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
about
synthetic, but not general.
therefore
So
neither
what?
axioms nor intuition.
What exactly is general again?
Okay.
Oh, yeah. There's a note as well
Hold on.
about extensive magnitude here.
Okay, so after searching the PDF for every use of the word axiom and skimming around it, and after reading that, here's what I think tentatively.
Okay.
He's using axiom because it's mathematical. And the others could just as well, in the way I would use axiom, be called axioms. But he wants to give them all different names.
Right.
Like that's all it is.
Oh,
So
so anticipations of perceptions are
are
basically
also what
axioms
I
of
would call
perception.
axioms. Yes, the anticipations of perception are axioms of perception. The analogies of experience are axioms of experience. The postulates of empirical thinking in general are axioms of empirical thinking in general. He's using the word principle in a way which is only different from the word axiom in that he's using the word axiom to deal with specifically formal
Intuitions. Oh,
mathematics.
damn.
So, I
Kant's
guess
terminology got us again.
yeah, I guess the reasoning for that is that like Euclid, right? Axioms, normally you're talking math. But
Oh,
that's not true because like in logic there are axioms.
were there when Kant was doing it though?
Yes, Spinoza.
Yeah, I mean, but Kant is
But
also
that was a
reacting kind
geometrical
of. But
proof.
Kant's also reacting kind of against the rationalism and empiricism. But like Kant is not a traditional rationalist like
I
Spinoza.
understand that, but I'm saying that like it's he would be aware that what he's calling principles would probably mean more generally called axioms. And I don't think there was a need for him to use the word axiom independently of principle without clarifying. So I think he just means like what I would call an axiom by principle.
Fair
Hmm.
enough, but Kant is
Okay.
Kant.
Um, I could have sworn there was like a
Some
place where he
distinction.
equated.
No, there was because he talked about like how all mathematical formulas are not axioms. That's what we
Right.
were looking. But that's about them all not being principles. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think the same logic could apply to the principles we're
Right.
looking at now.
That's like a compelling argument, and I like before I agree with it, I just want to make sure that I'm not like, I, I would love it if I found that sentence where I thought he equated principles with categories, but I don't know if that's actually true or not. I could just be misremembering.
I think basically,
Oh
with
wait.
principles, he's talking about the axioms used to apply the categories in any given situation.
Okay. The
That's
principles of the
what I think.
transcendental aesthetic, therefore, according to which space and time are the conditions of possibility, all things appearances, as well as the restriction of these principles, namely, they can't be related to things themselves, do not belong. Okay, so the principle, so here's at least an example of where he uses principles again in relation to the aesthetic, the transcendental aesthetic. He says the principles of those of the principles of those things are that they are the conditions of the possibility of all things as appearances, and then they have a restriction that they cannot be related to the things in themselves. So
Yeah, but that's everything he mentioned so far in
right,
the entire critique of pure reason.
right. But my
Is there
point is,
anything to which the statement it's the condition like that's is there anything in the critique of pure reason which he has attempted to establish which is not already what you've talked about?
no. But like my point in bringing that up though is that like those are the principles of the transcendental like aesthetic. So maybe we can use that like so the principle of like use examine the way principle is being used here and see if that lines up with what you were saying. Um, yeah, I guess they're just like rules to follow for the or like definitions essentially, right? Because if you had to define like what space and time are, they are the conditions of the possibility of all things as appearances.
Okay. Um well, uh I think probably we can read now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. God, this is this is comprehensive, people. That is my excuse.
Well, the main problem is we were writing like the most difficult part of the critique of pure reason,
Yeah,
and
and
then we took a massive break.
Yeah, fall 2024 semester long break to be exact. To which I say, my bad. um,
So
I just had to
yeah,
get an oof in there.
it definitely is an oof. I'd call it an oof.
Sorry, guys. I started grad school and wanted to figure out how to
No, it's
manage my time.
understandable, but it's still an oof.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get another one. All right. Okay. So do we want to begin? Should we begin up here now, or now that we've had that, do you want to pick
Yeah.
up later?
Can I read?
Yeah, Pat.
Wait.
Does that sound good? Starting here still,
No,
or do you want to go down more now that we've like recapped a bit more?
no, I think we should still start here.
All right. Yeah, Kirk.
Okay.
Then take us away if you'd like to.
So, accordingly, every sensation, thus also every reality and appearance, however small it may be, has a degree, i.e., an intensive magnitude, which can still always be diminished. And between reality and negation, there's a continuous nexus of possible realities and of possible smaller perceptions. Every color, example given, red, has a degree, which, however small it may be, is never the smallest, and it is the same with warmth, with the moment of gravity, etc. The
Yeah.
property of
So,
magnitude.
hang on. Sorry. We're just gonna stop at each paragraph, unless there's like an absurdly short one. But yeah. So just to recap, this. Yeah. So Kant's basically just. Oh yeah, yeah. Right. This was the paragraph, right, Pat, where we were like, oh, he should have just said this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I read that as a Spinozistic, like what Spinoza would call an axiom, right? If
Yeah.
he's saying, "Oh, this is an axiom of the way we actually experience things," then it makes sense what he's doing, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we're on the right track.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, and this
So an
also just makes
axiom,
sense.
but just to clarify, so basically an axiom is just something like you can't escape if you're going to engage in this project.
Yeah, that's a okay definition. I think more he's like saying the project here is not his argument, but it's like experience in general. Like he thinks it's not objective, but like
Universal.
a universal
A
axiom.
priori,
Yeah,
necessary, universal.
yeah, and a necessary a priori axiom. He doesn't take it axiomatic for a particular argument. He thinks that it's axiomatic for experience.
Yeah,
Because
as in
that's
it's
that's
supposed
the
to be
issue
issue
being
for
dealt with in
all.
this book.
it's a precondition for knowledge acquisition.
Yes, more
Yeah.
specifically, if when looking at the section we're in, it's for perception.
Yes, and perception is a condition for knowledge acquisition.
Well, yeah, I mean we'll get there, but well, we kind
Yeah,
of already did get there, but yeah,
it's even before knowledge acquisition.
it's because it's before we're literally anticipating perception here, so right. It's like
Me when I get my perceptions.
By the way, can I say something that's a little bit tangential?
yeah, but keep it short because we've already spent
Okay, I just want to say I looked up that
25
Omi guy, and I saw he was inspired by this guy named Yirmiyahu Yovel, who also wrote
Oh,
Kant.
sorry, Kirk. This seems really like more of a
Very
personal conversation. I really would like to keep it on the nose here.
Yeah.
But
So go
after,
off, I just-
yeah, off Kant study recording. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Okay.
So would you like to read next, Pat, or?
Sure, I'll read next. Okay.
The property.
The property of magnitudes on account of which no part of them is the smallest, no part is simple, is called their continuity. Space and time are quanta continua because no part of them can be given except as enclosed between boundaries, points, and instants. Thus only in such a way that this part is, again, a space or a time. Space therefore consists of space times of times. Points and instants are only boundaries, i.e., mere places of their limitation. But places always presuppose those intuitions that limit or determine them. And from mere places as components that could be given prior to space or time, neither space or time can be composed. Magnitudes of this sort can also be called flowing, since the synthesis of the productive imagination in their generation is a progress in time, the continuity of which is customarily designated by the expression flowing or elapsing.
I still can't get over that. Just like he could have chosen so many more, and like I don't know why I picked this one. That's really funny.
This
Okay.
sounds like very similar to like Zeno's paradox. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes, we have. This is actually, I suppose, solving Zeno's paradox in a way, if you want to look at it from that lens.
Attempting to.
Yeah, at least attempting to. Yeah. So, but again, he's kind of taking this as an axiom, right? So he's not really looking to argue about it. um, anyway, yeah. So this is okay. So this is what I was also looking for before when I was looking for like what is it, the spectrum. We were calling it a spectrum. This is what the quanta continua. Yeah. So he's saying, no part of them is the smallest. So all right, this is what I'm a little confused on still, actually. So is he saying that why is he saying no part of them is the smallest? Magnitudes, right? So this would include intensive and extensive? But if
Is he
Yeah.
saying,
but
is he
if
saying measurement is relative necessarily?
no, hang on. Sorry, let me just pose a question real quick. If this is including intensive and extensive magnitudes, but intensive magnitude is a moment of apprehension, how can magnitudes be a continuity? Oh no, it's the property of Oh no, he's not saying. Okay, so the property. Okay, so but this property might not belong to intensive magnitudes then. Pat, do you understand what I'm saying? Hold on, sorry.
No,
This is like
I'm
word
sorry,
salad.
I don't understand.
Okay, let me
what
try
you're
to.
saying.
I'm like putting this together as I'm like asking a question.
I personally do not find this difficult, so should I try maybe explaining what he's saying?
I understand what he's saying generally. What I'm asking is how does this relate to intensive magnitude specifically? I'm caught up here because intensive.
No, I think it's sort of tangential.
Okay. Okay. Oh well. Well, that's still confusing to me because then would this property of magnitudes, namely continuity, whatever quanta continue, would this not apply to intensive magnitudes? That's kind of my question.
No, it does apply to intensive magnitudes.
Okay, then that's confusing to
point.
me because it's their continuity, right? But I thought there was no continuity in intensive magnitudes, right? They're just
Why did you think that?
because the thing about apprehension feels only an instant, does not take into consideration succession.
But an instant is an abstraction that we never actually have instants.
But we need it, right? Because we need to apprehend something, right? Initially.
I guess, but
There.
he's
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're getting at anymore.
I'm basically confused because, to my understanding, intensive magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, wait! I just forgot the definition of intensive magnitude. Okay, hang on, wait. Now that I call as unity, in which multiples can only be represented through approximation. Oh, okay. If one regards. Oh, but yeah, the degree designates only that magnitude of the apprehension which is not successive, but instantaneous. Oh, but I touched. Okay, I'm confusing the definition here of it. Like, what is intensive magnitude? Is it not like what is this unity? Can you elaborate on that for me, Patrick?
Intensive magnitude is how intense a sensation is.
Right, but I thought that was like as it was apprehended. But is that not the case?
Intensive magnitude is. I think he's calling intensive magnitude a principle of the understanding, in that we apprehend immediately some kind of uh, intensity of magnitude. And we can only conceptualize this as closer to reality or closer to negation by way of possible comparison.
Right. So it has that like um attribute, I
So the
guess you could say,
conceptual.
of being based in
Okay, so I guess
apprehension.
it's this. I guess
Yeah.
it's this, right? So trying to put it all together,
Yeah.
we're talking about principles or axioms that ground all the judgments we make. All right.
Yes.
So the question is, what is the axiom that grounds the judgments we can make about quality, namely reality or negation? Okay.
Mhm.
So how do we make a judgment about reality or negation? The answer Kant gives is through reference to the intensive magnitude of a sensation. Now, intensive magnitude is, I mean, the easiest way for me to think about it is like if you have a light, maybe just like a given light. All right. Um, Heat might actually be even better. Okay, a sensation of heat. Um, it has to be higher. Like there is a zero sensation of cold or heat where you don't notice any cold or heat. Right.
Yep.
That's a zero.
Yep.
That's negation. Okay, so let's go to heat. Then we turn it up from zero to like some higher degree of heat, right? The surface I'm touching
Mhm.
is a little bit hotter than my hand that is
Mhm.
touching it. Okay, so in that, through that fact, I can affirm the reality of the heat as a sensation, right? Whereas if the intensive magnitude were diminished to zero, then I could negate that heat. And I might even say that if I'm making a comparison between like something extremely hot, like the surface of a stove, and let's just say a seat that was a little bit warmed, the seat is closer to zero. So by way of comparison, I could say that no, it's not hot. But I might say that it's warm, for example.
Right, but I'm confused about how that comparison happens.
He
If
says that we make it imaginatively by imagining degrees of heat increasing or decreasing from zero to the maximum possible heat.
and where is that? Where he says that?
A
Do you
little
know?
further up before we started today. It was the last time we talked about it. Keep going. I think it's the first time he mentions flowing. So further, further. I think. No, maybe not. All right, go down. Just slow, slow,
Oh,
slow.
sorry. I was looking for flowing.
um, Okay, slower. Just go down, down, slow, nice and slow. All right. Yes. Here we go. Uh, B B210. Now, however, every sensation is capable of diminution, such that it can decrease and thus gradually disappear. Hence, between reality and appearance and negation, there is a continuous nexus of many possible intermediate sensations, whose difference from one another is always smaller than the difference between a given 1 and 0, or complete negation. That is, the real in appearance always has a magnitude, which is not, however, encountered in apprehension, as this takes place through by means of mere sensation in an instant, and not through a successive synthesis of many sensations, and thus does not proceed from the parts of the whole. Therefore has a magnitude, but not an extensive one.
Okay. This is, I think, is what I was missing. Okay, or
Yeah,
just
and go
forgetting.
down a little bit. He talks about, like in the next paragraph, I think. Uh, yeah. Yes. So now I call that magnitude, which can only be apprehended as a unity, and in which multiplicity can only be represented through approximation to negation, intensive magnitude. Thus, every reality in the appearance has intensive magnitude, i.e., a degree, such as a degree of heat.
Right.
If one regards this reality as cause, skip the parentheses, then one calls the degree of reality of cause a moment, i.e., the moment of gravity, because indeed the degree designates not only
But
that
that's
magnitude.
different from intensive magnitude, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's
He touches on it
different from
only
extensive
past.
magnitude. No, it's different from extensive magnitude because it's
Well, intensive magnitude. I'm saying. How's it?
so designating a degree is by way of possible succession of different degrees. But the actual degree itself is instantaneous.
But the way we ascertain the degree at all is through comparison.
Right, it's the way we conceptualize it.
Oh God! Wait, I think I'm okay. I think it's clicking. So after the succession, we can isolate like a specific intensive magnitude.
Right.
Oh. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought, yeah. Okay, the temporal process is where I was getting confused. I thought he was saying like apprehension and thus intensive magnitude happens, but then it happens again like through compare. I was like, what the fuck? Like, isn't that two separate things? Yes, it is. Intensive magnitude is
Yeah.
after it's been isolated. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry. Although not really sorry because I don't think that was the easiest thing in the world to get. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad I understand now. Okay.
Yeah, I think I get it.
Okay. So are we picking up at all appearances or whatsoever?
Sean's fine.
Sure. Yeah.
Would you like to read, Matt, or could I read?
Yeah,
Or...
I will continue. Then Kirk, are you okay with reading the next one?
Yeah, sure.
All right. All appearances whatsoever are accordingly continuous magnitudes, either in intuition as extensive magnitudes, or in their mere perception, sensation, and thus reality as intensive ones. If the synthesis of the manifold of appearance is interrupted, then it is an aggregate of many appearances, and not really appearance as quantum, which is not generated through the mere continuation of productive synthesis of a certain kind, but through the repetition of an ever-ceasing synthesis. If I call $13 a quantum of money, I do so correctly insofar as I mean by that an amount of a mark of fine silver, which is to be sure a continuous magnitude, in which no part is the smallest, but each part could constitute a coin that would always contain material for still smaller ones. But if by the term 13 round dollars I mean so many coins, whatever their amount of silver might be, then it would not be suitable to call this a quantum of dollars, but it must instead be called an aggregate, i.e., a number of coins. Now, since there must still be a unity grounding every number, appearance as unity is a quantum, and is as such always a continuum. Okay, so Kant has provided an example of what he's talking about here through money. So I kind of want to break this down just so I can like really lock it in my mind, because as you just saw earlier, if it's not locked in, it could escape and we could have very bad conceptual misunderstandings. So, okay. So $13, a quantum of money. That is correct in the sense that it's an amount of silver or just an amount of like material money. But 13 round dollars is not a quantum of material money, but it's an aggregate. Does anyone know the definition of aggregate? This is a new vocabulary.
Yes. So
Yeah, I do know what
aggregate. I'm not sure how he distinguishes a quantum from an aggregate, because an aggregate is literally just you put everything together. It's basically a sum.
Oh, a sum. Like a sum of quantum? Or quanta?
You could say so.
Quantity.
I'm familiar from it. I'm familiar with it from economics.
Oh.
So in economics, you might talk about something like aggregate demand, which is the total demand of all people for all products.
Oh, yeah. So I'm looking at the definition. A whole formed by combining several
Typically disparate elements. I guess that's the difference. A quanta is not disparate, and an aggregate is disparate.
Okay. So, but he's using it here just to mean like the whole.
Ah, I understand. So if he's talking about, for example, 13 literal dollar bills,
Yes.
right, versus a $5 bill and 8 $1 bills.
Oh, is that what he means by round? I couldn't really grasp
Yes,
that. Okay.
it must be.
It was
He
in the
means
round.
So many coins, whatever their amount of silver might be. Then it would not be suitable to call this a quantum of dollars, but must instead be called an aggregate, i.e. a number of coins. So a quantum is continuous and of the same thing. An aggregate is not.
Okay. I think it's because I don't know. I couldn't like picture historically in this time what like coins and silver and like money and all those differences were. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions about this? Oh, actually, I have a question. So relating this to magnitude now, can we understand this part prior to the example?
Huh?
So like he elaborates, right, with that example of money between quanta and aggregate. Like, what does that mean for this first part of the paragraph?
All appearances whatsoever are accordingly continuous magnitudes, either in their intuition as extensive magnitudes or their mere perception.
Is the perception the like aggregate like, and the extensive is
Yes.
continuous?
So either in their intuition,
I think
or in
so.
their mere perception. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well,
Intuition is any representation so far as it's given. So there's nothing more mere than intuition at all. He must mean pure intuition here and be using his terms wrong.
I think he is. Yeah.
So I think he's talking about in their pure intuition as opposed to the empirical intuition of
Yes.
of sensation. But he's just misusing his terms. All right,
Yes.
whatever.
Sensation is reality. This is a very helpful.
Yeah, without that, it'd be pretty confusing. But
we would spend another 30 minutes on this shit.
He's just misusing his terms. He's talking about intuition as in space-time intuition. He's just misusing his terms. Okay, so continuing, if the synthesis.
Sorry. I thought you meant continuing reading. Sorry.
If the synthesis of the manifold of appearance is interrupted, then it is an aggregate of many appearances, and not really an appearance as a quantum. It's just a definition. That's all. He's just taking the difference between a quantum and an aggregate. That's the whole paragraph. I don't know where he's going with that, but
that's what I mean. Like, can we relate that to magnitudes? But I think we can. I
don't know where he's going with that, but I could see it potentially going somewhere.
All right.
That's the best I got.
Should we let him cook then?
Yeah.
All right. Kirk, you want to take it away? You're next, right?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, where do you want me to start? So, now if all appearances considered extensively as well as intensively are continuous magnitudes, then the proposition that all alteration, transition of a thing from one state to another is also continuous could be proved here easily and with mathematical self-evidence if the causality of an alteration in general did not lie entirely beyond the boundaries of a transcendental philosophy and presuppose empirical principles.
Aha,
So,
interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
for the understanding gives us no inkling a priori that a cause is possible when it alters statements, i.e., determines them to be the opposite of a certain given state, not merely because it simply does not give us insights into the possibilities for this insight lacking many a priori recognitions, but rather because alterability concerns only certain determinations of appearances, by which experience alone can teach us what a cause is to be found in the unalterable. But since we have before us here nothing that we can use except the pure fundamental concepts of all possible experience, in which there must be nothing but at all empirical, we can not anticipate general natural science, which is built upon certain fundamental experiences without injuring the unity of the system.
Wow. Okay. To my understanding here, just immediately before breaking it down, it seems like he's totally going against that infamous nature wizard, Pat, that we were
No,
referencing.
because he
It's
still
nature
affirms
what?
the nature wizard. I think he's saying that he can't do it here. I think he's saying
Oh.
that this is not the place for nature wizard because
Oh.
he is a nature wizard. So this is an inside reference. By nature wizard, we're talking about the fact that like Kant, for one thing, uh, thinks that you can know the principles, like general principles of natural science, including like the conservation of matter. The law of conservation of matter, he says you can know a priori. Of course, the problem with this is that the law of conservation of matter is not even true.
Synthetic a posteriori, not true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in addition to being synthetic a posteriori, it turns out not to be true, as Einstein proved. So and then, you know, Matt sort of had this long time where he's looking for some way for it to be true.
Yeah, and
And
I failed.
it's not. It's just not. He's just wrong about this. You can't infer general laws of natural science, eh, properly so called, from anything a priori. You can't. It doesn't work.
Obviously, like a priori, like don't take the misunderstand this. Like a priori principles and categories, obviously, like play a role as we are seeing here and will continue to see. However, like you can't just do that without any empirical uh, stuff.
Yeah, like by science we're talking about like
Natural, yeah.
specific synthetic predictions,
Like
synthetic
specific
dynamical.
models. It's like
Yeah,
specific
synthetic. Well,
models.
here's literally what it means: a dynamical principle. Like it's a dynamical principle that allows us to predict a priori what is going to happen. And I don't believe that there's a single dynamic principle. There are mathematical ones and not dynamical ones.
Well, for the natural world, you can't. It seems like Kant is diverging from like traditional rationalism with regards to like deducing metaphysics from a priori concepts.
Well, we're not there yet, I think.
Um, well, yeah, we're not talking about metaphysics. We're talking about physics, actually.
Yeah, natural
Well,
science.
but they have overlap.
Well,
Yes, but not
but
in this case. He's talking
yeah,
about
they're
like
actually
these.
separate. Yeah, in this like specific, in the sense of like what you can deduce a priori versus empirically, they're very different. In fact, that's what makes them different. I would go as far as to say. Um, although with Kant that gets complicated, and we'll continue to see the details of that. But generally, yeah. So, so that's so interesting, Patrick. You think in Kant's little table on 285, the applied mathematics dynamics is just like not knowledge.
Dynamics is just yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
um
I
I
mean,
mean the idea of causation happening. Yeah, I don't know. He certainly hasn't inferred any specific rules.
okay. Well then, well actually, this is a good opportunity to like bring it back to this part of the text. So what is he doing here exactly? Because now we've gotten away from this, and I'm like lost kind of what he's saying. Um, let's see. So yeah, yeah. So what I thought was really interesting here was this line, um, alteration. He says what it is. Is those continuous proved here, right? if causality of alteration in general didn't lie entirely beyond the boundaries of transcendental philosophy and presuppose empirical principles. So he's saying with his own transcendental philosophy,
No. If the causality of an alteration in general.
yeah,
So if the causality, in other words, what is the specific cause of an alteration?
that lies beyond transcendental philosophy. You have to presuppose empirical principles.
Yes. But the causality, so for instance, if I make a claim like the conservation of matter, I think Kant would say that the causality of an alteration isn't there. It's just what alterations are possible or not.
Hold on, can you like say that in a different way? Sorry.
Okay, so the causality of an alteration in general. He's talking about what specifically could alter
Or could cause an
some
alteration?
Yeah. Yes, could cause an alteration.
Right.
So he's saying that that's beyond the boundaries of transcendental philosophy.
Yes.
So, for instance, something like gravity. Gravity is a force. It's the
Yes.
cause of an alteration, right? But the law of conservation of matter is not the cause of an alteration. It's a cause of limitation of alteration. It's not even a cause in the Kantian sense. It's the reason why certain alterations are not possible. So it doesn't fall under what he's talking about right here, I don't think.
So what is he talking about here?
Again, things like forces.
Okay.
Because
That causes movement. Yeah, it causes an alteration. Okay.
Yeah, the causes of movement.
Okay. Sorry, for a second I like got like Hegel and like force in the understanding, and hold on, no, I have to get that out of my head. Okay, just like Newtonian force. Okay. Okay, so
Yeah,
with that in mind, let me hold on.
force in Hegel doesn't seem to be force.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, ignoring. Sorry. Okay. If all. So he's saying that alteration is also continuous. Can be it's self-evident, right? That based on
Continuous? Yeah.
that based on what magnitudes are intensively and extensively, right? We've kind of demonstrated that, or he's defined, right, those as continuous. Therefore, alteration, right, it just kind of follows. But that doesn't mean we can know which forces cause which alterations.
We can't know, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And that's basically this whole paragraph, right?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Pat, you're up next. Unless there are other questions, I guess you could read these two ones because this one's like
I'll do two of them.
Thanks.
Nevertheless, we are not lacking proofs of the great influence that our principle has in anticipating perceptions, and even in making good their absence. Making good their absence? What does that mean?
Insofar as it draws the.
What do you mean making good their absence? What does that possibly mean?
There's not even like a footnote or anything. Like, it's just a
What do you
sentence.
mean making good?
Okay, so what are we? Hold on.
Nevertheless, we
we're
are not
lacking proofs of the
great influence that our principle has.
Namely, yeah. So
and even in making good their absence, I guess in anticipating their absence, insofar as it draws the bolt against all the false inferences that might be drawn.
What the fuck does this
from that?
Why does this exist? Is he just saying that like we're not lacking proofs, so we are not making false statements?
The first class, but making good their absence insofar as it draws the bolt against all false inferences. That might be drawn from that.
So even I guess he's saying even if we lack, I think he's saying in there in the lack of having these in the lack of these principles, in the absence of these principles, we still will not draw false inferences.
No, because he's
No?
talking about how great the principle is. I think he's talking about the perception, the absence of the perceptions.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay. In the absence of perceptions, based on these principles, we won't make false inferences of anticipations of perceptions, even in the absence of perceptions.
Why does he write like that, bro? Why does he write like this? Why can't he just say what he means?
Yeah.
I have a strong intuition that what he's saying here is shockingly simple. But why
Yeah.
did he say making good their absence insofar as it draws the bolt
Keep in
against
mind.
all the false inferences
Keep in
that
mind.
might be drawn from that?
Keep in mind, this is translated from German. In German, this might make a lot more sense. What?
Okay, whatever. He's probably going to show us what he means by that in more detail in the next paragraph anyway.
Yeah, that's usually what he does. Go ahead,
If
sir.
all reality and perception has a degree between which negation, there's an infinite gradation
Right,
of
so just
ever lesser
repetition.
degrees. And if likewise every sense must have a determinate degree of receptivity for the sensations, okay, then no perception and hence no experience is possible that, whether immediately or mediately, skip, would prove an entire absence of everything real in appearance. I.e., a proof of empty space or of empty time can never be drawn from experience. Okay, sure. So, okay. All right. So he's saying that, like, entire absence of everything real in appearance.
So you
So
can't.
saying that, like, you can't prove a void
Yeah.
is his point. Like, you cannot prove a void.
Because because of the way these principles work in terms of like their.
Yeah, that is relevant. That is relevant. He's saying you can't prove a void, right? And some people, like namely atomists and stuff, tried to prove that there's such a thing as like a void between atoms, even up to the time of John Locke. And he's saying that you cannot prove definitively that there is an empty space or an empty time. He's saying you can't prove a void.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's relevant. For first, the entire absence of the real and sensible intuition cannot itself be perceived, and second, it cannot be deduced from any single appearance, and the difference of the degree of its reality, nor may it even be assumed for the explanation of that. For even if the entire intuition of a determinate space or time is real through and through, no part of it is empty. I.e., no part of it is empty. Since every reality has a degree that can decrease to nothing, emptiness, through infinite steps, while the extensive magnitude of appearance remains unaltered, it must yield infinitely different degrees with which space or time is filled, and the intensive magnitude in different appearances can be smaller or greater, even though the extensive magnitude of the intuition remains nearly identical.
So essentially, is he saying that no matter where you look, there's going to be space or time?
Yeah, no matter where you look, you can't definitively actually negate. You can't prove a void. Basically, again, I think he's just giving this in.
But what's his reasoning for that specifically? Because he's bringing up space, and so like right, because a void
So
will still be made up of space and time infinitely, right?
No, he's saying you can't prove a void because the degree, or even though if the entire intuition is real through and through, no part of it is empty. Yes, because there are infinite steps between absolute negation and some sensible thing.
Oh, so there's never really one whole thing either.
Yeah, well, look, take an example, sound, okay? Mm-hmm. So if I decrease sound to an imperceptible degree, that does not mean that the air is not vibrating. Right? You
right.
Make it a smaller degree.
Drawn from experience. Right, okay.
Right, so you could always make it, well, he's saying...
Like logically, like abstractly you could think that, but you can never...
Well, he's saying you might abstractly think a void, but you can't ever prove that one actually exists in the phenomenal world.
Yes.
Because in order to do that, you would need to make it empirical, which is not possible. Because
in Hegel's terms, you would need to actualize the idea. I don't know. Sorry, that was stupid.
I've employed a similar argument to this, so this is why it's familiar with me.
Okay.
It's this argument of like, okay, so we don't sense anything outside of the we don't have any evidence of anything outside of the observable universe. That is not evidence of absence of anything outside of the observable universe, right? And we
Yeah.
never could, in fact, have evidence of absence. No matter how much of the universe we observed, we could never have any evidence that there wasn't more, right? So this is one of the he'll use this later when it's the same kind of reasoning he uses to not prove in his own terms that the universe is infinite.
Oh, like the one side of the antinomy.
Yeah, the
Okay.
other side of the end. Yes, exactly. Right? We can never come to an end. Just like that, we can never prove a void.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is relevant. It counters scientism.
Yeah.
Even today, I think it counters scientism.
And
Okay.
scientism is rejected by most serious people.
Well, yeah.
But he's
But
giving a pretty compelling argument, like in that favor. That those people themselves, I don't
right.
really am
It
not
counters
familiar with this
scientism,
debate.
and it counters scientism in a very specific way. Anyway, yeah, I think I understood that. Did you guys understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move forward. That one was a nice and easier one.
Okay. I'll read. We'll give an example of this. Nearly all natural philosophers, since they perceive a great difference in the quantity of matter of different sorts. I feel like this is going to be exactly what we were saying, like the atomists, but okay. Nearly all natural philosophers, since they perceive a great difference in the quantity of matter of different sorts in the same volumes, partly through the moment of gravity or weight, partly through the moment of resistance against another, moved matter, unanimously infer from this that this volume, extensive magnitude, the appearance, must be empty in all matter, although to be sure in different amounts. But who among these, for the most part, mathematical and mechanical students of nature, ever realized that their inference rested solely on a metaphysical presupposition, which they make so much of a pretense of avoiding? Question.
Yep, counter scientism.
Yep, yeah. For they assume that the real in space, I cannot call it here impenetrability or weight, since these are empirical concepts, is everywhere one and the same, and can be differentiated only according to its extensive magnitude, i.e. amount. Against this presupposition, for which they can have no ground in experience and which is only therefore metaphysical, I oppose a transcendental proof, which to be sure will not explain the variation in the filling of space, but which still will entirely obviate the alleged necessity of the presupposition that the difference in question cannot be explained except by the assumption of empty spaces, and which has the merit of at least granting the understanding the freedom also to think of this difference in another way, if the explanation of nature should make some hypothesis necessary for this end. For there we see that, although equal spaces can be completely filled with different matters in such a way that in neither of them is there ever a point in which the presence of matter is not to be encountered, nevertheless everything real has for the same quality its degree of resistance or weight, which, without diminution of the diminution, thank you, diminution of the diminution.
Yes.
Data.
Like diminished.
Diminution of the extensive magnitude or amount can become infinitely smaller until it is transformed into emptiness and disappears. Thus, an expansion that fills a space, e.g. warmth, and likewise every other reality and appearance can, without in the least leaving the smallest part of the space empty, decrease in degree infinitely, and nonetheless fill the space with this smaller degree, just as well as another appearance does of the larger one. My aim here is by no means to assert that this is how it really is concerning the specific gravity of the variety of matters, but only to establish, on the basis of a principle of pure understanding, that the nature of our perceptions makes an explanation of this sort possible, and that it is false to assume that the real in appearance is always equal in degree and differs only in aggregation and its extensive magnitude, especially when this allegedly asserted on the basis of a principle of understanding a priori. Okay, holy shit, that was so long, but I think really Patrick summed it up nicely. Patrick, did you see anything in there that, like, all of it seemed to just corroborate what you were saying? I didn't see any, like, really
No, I
elaboration.
think it just corroborated basically what I was saying earlier.
Yeah. And he gives examples, of space and heat, or warmth specifically, and every other reality in appearance. Okay. Well, since that was so succinctly put by Patrick, I guess if there are no other questions, we can resume. And oh my gosh, we're 2 paragraphs away from finally being done with the anticipations of perception. So, Kirk, would you like to take away B217?
Sure.
Oh,
Okay.
do you have a question
So,
or a comment?
oh no, everything seems like box on pat.
Awesome.
So nevertheless, there must always be something striking about this anticipation and perception for a researcher who has become accustomed to transcendental consideration and thereby become cautious and some reservations aroused about the fact that the understanding can anticipate a synthetic proposition of sort, which that concerning the degree of everything real in appearance is, and thus the possibility of the inner variation of the sensation itself is, if one abstracts from its empirical quality and is therefore a question not unworthy of solution, how the understanding can assert something synthetic a priori about appearances, and indeed anticipate them in that which is really merely empirical, namely what pertains to sensation. The quality of sensation.
I think we'll pass that on to Pat for the last one.
Okay.
Were there any questions about this? I think he's just kind of making a comment about the striking nature.
Um. So, yeah. How the understanding can assert something synthetic a priori about appearances, and is indeed anticipate them, is merely empirical, namely what pertains to sensation. Um. Yeah. So it's basically talking about like the fact that, oh, how is it possible that we are anticipating um something that it seems like we should be able to observe or not. And he's saying this is his explanation of it. Okay, so the quality of sensation is always merely empirical and cannot be represented a priori at all. But the real, which corresponds to sensations in general in opposition to the negation, only represents something whose concept in itself contains a being and does not signify anything except the synthesis in an empirical consciousness in general. In an inner sense, namely, the empirical consciousness can be raised up from zero up to any greater degree, so that the very same extensive magnitude of intuition, e.g., an illuminated surface, can excite as great a sensation as an aggregate of many other less illuminated surfaces taken together. One can therefore abstract entirely from the extensive magnitude of appearance and yet represent in the mere sensation in one moment a synthesis of uniform increase from zero up to a given empirical consciousness. All sensations are thus, as such, given only a posteriori, but their property of having a degree can be cognized a priori. It is remarkable that we can cognize a priori of all magnitudes in general only a single quality, namely continuity, but that in all quality, the real of appearances, we can cognize a priori nothing more than their intensive quantity, namely that they have a degree. Wait, isn't that just what he said?
Oh my god, wait, dude, why didn't this whole like oh, I feel like this whole thing, this whole section could have been like this paragraph plus like the stuff about the anti-scientism, like that we were saying before.
Well, no, because those are conclusions. He's talking about how it is a principle. Okay, but hold on. This right
Then
here.
this could
Let me
be the
read that
whole.
again because
Okay.
I can't even distinguish between these two clauses. It is remarkable that we can cognize a priori of all magnitudes in general only a single quantity, namely continuity, but that in all quality, the real of appearances, we can cognize nothing a priori nothing more than their intensive quantity. Oh,
Yeah, I didn't think that
okay.
was.
Namely that they have a degree and everything else is left to experience. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, could this not have been like the almost the whole section?
No, because he was um no, but it is easier to understand than the rest of it.
Well, what's being left out here?
What's being left out is the fact that this is where we get the idea of quantity, for one thing. Another thing that's being left off is the fact that we have to represent it successively, and therefore intensively, and therefore in time.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
guess that was. I guess I got used to those ideas already, so this seemed like pretty elementary. But
uh, and the difference between a quanta and an aggregate, that's another difference that was not
oh,
covered here.
yeah.
Um, although,
It's
again, I'm
present,
not
but
sure
not
what the
explained.
where he was going with that. It seems like a tangent.
Yeah.
Like it seems like, by the way, this is what a quanta is, and this is what an aggregate is. My students always get them confused, and it pisses me off. That's what
Yeah.
that sounded like to
Maybe
me. I
that was like
can't.
a second edition. Only I don't know. Who knows? But
I don't know. I don't know why he has to teach us the difference between a quanta and an aggregate, but maybe it'll come up later.
yeah. Well, at least the main ideas were covered. I think the main distinction, and I guess just some of the details were important as well to add in. But I really think this is a helpful summary.
Yeah, well, welcome to reading Kant, where you should have done it backwards the whole time.
And we're gonna continue not doing that. Ha! Fuck you. You have to suffer with us, but that's
Fuck
what also
you,
makes it
us.
fun. Exactly, and well, also, this is gonna be on YouTube, so fuck you.
Following the law, following the law. Pew!
Smoke weed every day.
Yeah, we're so badass reading a book front to back.
Yeah, how archaic are we? Clearly, Kant is ahead of our time. Okay, well,
No.
yeah, that was a big joke. He makes my head hurt. Okay, cool. So now we're gonna go to the analogies of experience, which is Patrick. The whole like first 25 minutes were helpful in realizing that it seems to make sense as well when I'm looking at like what the analogies of experience are and what he'll probably explain why this is the case. That experience is only possible through the representation of a necessary connection. Yeah, this seems to corroborate.
Oh yeah, this is the part where this next part gets spicy.
It does. I was
'Cause
gonna
now
say.
he's trying to disprove Hume. Now
Yeah.
he's trying to disprove Hume, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't think he succeeds.
Oh yeah. Let's. All right. Knob next. Next Dragon Ball Z. Next
Next time on
comprehensive.
Dragon Ball Z.
Next time on the comprehensive yet informal study of critique of priorities, and after autistically differentiating between yet necessarily differentiating between intensive and extensive quality and quantity and their epistemological metaphysical implications. Kant will be battling Hume.
Guys, we made it.
We made it to a cool part, and if it's anything like the other cool parts that we like begrudgingly like got up to, it will be so worth it. So,
Well, I mean,
knock on wood.
This is huge actually, because we were arguing about this like 3 years ago when we started this study. I was like, no, I don't think he actually successfully proves Hume wrong.
It was like a year and a half ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Okay, but regardless, at the whole beginning, this is one of the things that we were trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. I'm just really tired, so I can't. I'm not like woohoo, but I'm feeling woohoo. Yeah, I'm feeling
play
yippee.
press that yippee button, man.
There it is, fellas. All right. Well, we'll see you next time for that awesome battle of minds.
Top 10 anime fights.
Kant versus Hume. Hume isn't alive to like respond.
I don't think Hume would read Kant, to be honest with you.
You think so?
I really don't think that Hume would read Kant. At least not until Kant got so huge that you couldn't ignore him anymore. I think, like, because Hume talks about how like Hume genuinely believed that Locke was too technical and no one would read him later.
Was that just? Is he talking
Like, he
about?
writes that in his
Right.
inquiry.
I know that, but
he talks about how Locke was too technical, and so
Right.
Locke would be forgotten. And then some other philosopher I forgot, which gave like Marcus Aurelius tier like practical advice, would be the most important philosopher of the age. So he was super wrong on that.
But is he talking about just like in terms of common people read, or what he would read too? Because it seems like he's still reading
just
Locke.
people
Even
in the future. Like he just misinterpreted
Right.
how autistic people would be in the future.
yeah, but you're
Like,
saying
he
Hume
thought
wouldn't read
that,
it
like,
though. Like I think Hume would
No,
still read
Hume
it.
Hume might to an extent, but he's like, you should be balanced.
Oh
And Kant is not balanced.
no.
Kant is all the way technical.
Yeah. All right. Well, whether you've been enjoying this or not, if you've been following along, we'll see you for the next thing. Analogies experience. Big topic. Big topic. I'm excited.
Oh, yeah.
Hope you're excited. Let's get one more yippee and we'll sign off. Sayonara.
All right.
An hour and 16 minutes later. That's not the longest one. So.
It isn't.
All right. Well, we'll see you next
It's
time.
probably the longest two
See you next time, guys.
Oh
See
God,
ya.
yeah, longest. Oh yeah, I forgot this was multiple parts. Holy crap! All right, well we're done with it. We'll see you next time for exciting stuff. Bye bye.